Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to today's story. Forced to marry her sister's millionaire fiancé in Coma, her tears woke him up like a miracle. The rain had not stopped for 2 days. In a quiet town outside Chicago, the gray clouds hung low over the Hale family estate. Inside, the air was colder than the storm outside. Elena Reed stood by the grand staircase, clutching the edge of her thin coat as voices echoed from the study behind closed doors. Her mother's voice trembled with fear. "If we do not sign the papers, the Hales will withdraw the contract. Do you know what that means for us, Elena? We will lose the house, the clinic, everything your father built." Elena's heart pounded. She had heard those words too many times. The Hale fortune could save them, but at a price no daughter should ever have to pay. Because the man she was being asked to marry was not a stranger. He was her sister's fiancé, and he was in a coma. Adrian Hale, 32 years old, the heir to Hale Holdings. A man whose name once filled business magazines and social pages alike. 6 weeks ago, he was driving back from the airport when his car skidded off the highway in the storm. Since then, he had not opened his eyes. And now his powerful father, desperate to secure the family empire, had proposed a solution that chilled Elena to the bone. A quiet marriage on paper only to preserve the engagement and freeze the inheritance from greedy relatives circling like wolves. Her older sister, glamorous and vain, refused to marry a man lying motionless in a hospital bed. But her mother looked at Elena, the quiet one, the girl who still believed in decency, and said, "You owe this family everything." Elena swallowed hard. "You are asking me to marry a man who may never wake up." Her sister scoffed. "Do not act like a saint. You will be Mrs. Hale. People would die for that chance." She looked at the engagement ring that had belonged to her sister. It felt heavy in her palm, like a secret she did not want. "I will do it," she said softly. "But I want no money from the Hales, not a cent." Her mother gasped. "Elena, do not be foolish. I am not doing this for you," she whispered. "I am doing this because Dad's hospital bills are due tomorrow, and I have run out of time." The next morning, the rain cleared just enough for the sun to pierce through the clouds, pale and cold. In the private hospital wing, Elena walked through the sterile hallway in a simple ivory dress. There were no flowers, no music, no guests. Only a lawyer, a nurse, and the man she was about to marry, lying motionless beneath white sheets, connected to machines that kept him breathing. She stood beside the bed. Adrian Hale's face was pale, but his features were strong, sharp jawline, faint shadow of stubble, dark hair brushed neatly across his forehead. She had met him once before, at her sister's engagement party. He had been kind then, too kind for the world he lived in. He was the only one who noticed her slipping out of the crowd, overwhelmed by glitter and noise. He had offered her a glass of water and a smile. She never forgot that. Now, that same man was silent, his hand cold under hers as she slipped on the ring. "For better or worse," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Even if you never hear this." "Ah." The lawyer cleared his throat, signing the final document. "By law, you are now Mrs. Adrian Hale." Elena blinked back tears. A single drop rolled down her cheek and landed on his hand. For a heartbeat, the heart monitor flickered. Just a glitch, the nurse thought, but Elena froze. Did his fingers move? Or was it her imagination? She stayed still, staring at his face. "If you can hear me," she whispered, "I am sorry this happened. I will keep my promise. I will take care of you, even if you never wake up." The lawyer gathered the papers. The nurse turned off the recording camera, but no one saw the faintest twitch at the corner of Adrian's mouth, like the ghost of a smile, waiting to be born. Outside, thunder rolled once more. And somewhere between silence and sleep, a heartbeat quickened, soft, fragile, but alive. The following morning, the sky above Chicago was a dull silver, heavy with leftover rain. In the private wing of Street, Helena Hospital, Elena sat quietly beside Adrian's bed. The lawyer had left, the documents had been filed, and she was now, by every legal measure, Mrs. Adrian Hale. The title felt foreign on her tongue, like a borrowed name that did not belong to her. She stared at his motionless hand resting on the white sheet. The platinum ring caught the light, glinting coldly. "Good morning, Mr. Hale," she whispered, her voice barely above the hum of the machines. "I suppose we are married now. Strange, isn't it? You have no idea." Her shift at the local diner started in 3 hours, but she stayed. She always stayed. She had promised herself that even if the world saw this marriage as a deal, she would treat it like a duty. She leaned closer, adjusting the blanket around his chest. "You probably do not remember me," she murmured. "But once, at your engagement party, you handed me a glass of water when I nearly fainted. You said everyone deserves kindness. I never forgot that." Her voice trembled as she smiled faintly. "So, this is me returning the favor. I will be kind to you until the end." The room was quiet except for the rhythmic beeping of the monitor. Outside, the morning light pressed through the blinds in thin golden lines, dust floating like small ghosts in the air. She sat back, pulled out a notebook, and began writing a list: groceries, rent, medication, and her father's hospital bill. The numbers blurred. She closed her eyes, exhausted. Later that afternoon, a nurse entered the room carrying fresh flowers. "You are still here?" she asked kindly. "Most people do not last more than 10 minutes in this ward." Elena gave a tired smile. "I do not have anywhere else to be." The nurse tilted her head. "You care for him a lot." "I do not know if care is the right word," Elena said softly. "But I think no one should be alone like this." The nurse replaced the wilted roses on the table and left. Elena looked at Adrian again. The light flickered against the steady green line on the monitor. She stood, picked up a damp cloth, and carefully wiped his face. Every small gesture felt sacred, like she was holding time still. When she finished, she whispered, "See you tomorrow," then left for her shift. That night, the diner was nearly empty. Neon lights buzzed outside the fogged window, and the smell of burnt coffee lingered in the air. Elena worked quietly, wiping down tables, lost in thought. When her manager asked if she was married, she hesitated. "Something like that," she said. The lie tasted bitter, but she was too tired to explain. By midnight, she returned to her small apartment on the south side. Her father's medical files lay open on the kitchen counter. The bills were due in 2 days. She pressed her forehead against the papers, fighting the tightness in her chest. "Just hold on, Dad," she whispered. "I will fix this." The next morning, she returned to the hospital. The security guard at the lobby nodded. By now, everyone knew the quiet young woman who spent her mornings talking to the man in the Coma suite. She brought with her a thermos of coffee and a book she had borrowed from the library poems about second chances. She sat by Adrian's bedside, reading aloud. Her voice filled the sterile room like sunlight breaking through fog. "They say love does not end, it just changes form," she read, glancing up at his still face. "If that is true, maybe yours is just sleeping." A small sigh escaped her lips. She placed the book down and leaned back, talking to him as if he were listening. "I used to think love was about grand gestures, but lately, I think it is about staying when you have every reason to leave." The monitor beeped steadily in rhythm with her words, soft and slow. For a moment, she imagined he could hear her, somewhere deep inside the darkness. "You probably think I am foolish," she whispered. "Maybe I am, but I promise to stand by you, and I will." Days turned into weeks. Elena's visits became a ritual. Every morning before her shift, she would bring a fresh cup of coffee, change the flowers, and talk to him about the world outside the headlines, the people, the weather. It was the only part of her day that felt peaceful. The hospital staff began to notice. "She treats him like he is alive," one orderly said. "Maybe that is what keeps him that way," another replied. Elena ignored the whispers. She did not care what people thought. All she knew was that sitting beside Adrian made her feel less alone. Somewhere in her heart, she believed that even if he never woke up, her words might reach him like a faint light through a deep ocean. One afternoon, while adjusting the IV line, she noticed something strange. His fingers twitched, just a fraction, almost imperceptible, but enough to make her freeze. "Adrian?" she whispered, holding her breath. The monitor beeped faster for a brief moment, then returned to normal. She exhaled shakily. "It is just a reflex," she told herself. "Do not start believing in miracles." But her heart refused to listen. As she sat down again, she reached for his hand. "If you can hear me, even a little, keep fighting," she said softly. Maybe we can both find our way back. Outside the window, the first snowflakes of the season began to fall silent, slow, and gentle. Inside that quiet room, Elena held his hand a little longer, unaware that somewhere deep inside the man she had married by contract, something had begun to stir. 3 weeks had passed since the wedding no one spoke about. To the outside world, Elena Reed was invisible, just another face behind the counter at a small diner. But in the private suite of Street Helena Hospital, she was Mrs. Adrian Hale, the silent wife of a sleeping millionaire. Each morning began the same way. She would sign in at the nurse's desk, carry fresh lilies to the room, and sit beside his bed, as if waiting for a train that might never come. On that cold December morning, the world outside was blanketed in snow. The city was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes every sound echo louder. Elena poured warm water into a small basin, wrung out a soft cloth, and began to wipe Adrian's face. "Good morning," she said gently. "You missed another sunrise, but it was a beautiful one." She brushed a lock of dark hair from his forehead, her fingers trembling slightly. The nurse on duty, a woman named Clara, smiled as she passed by. "You take care of him like family," she said. Elena looked up. "He is my husband," she answered simply. "Even if the world does not see it that way," Clara nodded. "You know, the doctors say patients can sometimes hear familiar voices. Maybe he listens to you." Elena smiled faintly. "If he does, I hope my voice sounds kinder than life has been to him." She reached for a notebook from her bag, the same one she had used since the day of the wedding. Inside were small journal entries she had written every day. What the weather was like, what she read to him, little things she wanted him to know if he ever woke up. That morning she wrote, "December 12th. I keep wondering if a heart can remember kindness. Maybe that is what will bring you back." When she looked up again, she noticed a small change, barely visible, almost like her eyes were playing tricks on her. The rhythm on the heart monitor had steadied, stronger than before. She leaned forward, watching. "Adrian?" she whispered. "Can you hear me?" The door opened suddenly, breaking her focus. It was Mr. Hale, Adrian's father, followed by 2 lawyers in gray suits. The older man's presence filled the room like a storm cloud. "Mrs. Hale," he greeted, his tone cold and formal. "We need to review the agreement." Elena stood, nervous but composed. "The agreement?" "The terms of the marriage," he said sharply. 6 months of legal guardianship in exchange for continued medical coverage for your father. That was our understanding." He studied her face with suspicion. "You have fulfilled your duty, but I do not expect emotional attachments. This arrangement is business, nothing more." Elena's throat tightened, but she managed to speak calmly. "You think I am here for money. I am not. I am here because someone should be." The old man's expression softened for a brief second before turning hard again. "Compassion does not change the contract. Do not mistake charity for love." He turned and left with his entourage, leaving the scent of expensive cologne and cold air behind him. Elena sat back down, shaken but unbroken. She took Adrian's hand again. "I guess your father does not believe in miracles," she whispered. "But I still do." "No." That night the storm returned. Rain beat against the window as lightning flashed across the sky. Elena stayed late, afraid to leave. The power flickered once, twice, and then the lights went out completely. The machines hummed quietly on backup power, casting dim light across the room. She held a flashlight close to his face, her heart pounding. "Do not give up, Adrian," she murmured. "You once said everyone deserves kindness. I am holding you to that." Her eyes filled with tears. One slipped down her cheek and landed on his hand the same place as before. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a faint tremor ran through his fingers. The monitor beeped faster, steadier. She gasped. "Adrian?" The lights flickered back on, and she leaned over him, searching his face. His eyes remained closed, but she could swear she saw his lips move, almost forming her name. Her pulse raced. "You are fighting," she whispered. "I can feel it." "Oh." When the nurse hurried in, Elena pretended it was nothing. "Just a voltage surge," she said quickly, though her heart told her otherwise. After the nurse left, she sank into the chair again. The storm outside softened to a drizzle, and the city lights shimmered against the wet glass. She took his hand one more time and whispered, "If my tears can reach you, then maybe love can too." The room fell silent again, but in that silence, something fragile had changed. Beneath the surface of machines and medicine, a spark of life stirred inside the man the world believed would never wake up. Elena did not see it, but the corners of Adrian Hale's lips curved almost imperceptibly, as if some part of him had finally heard her. Winter had settled deeply over Chicago, painting the city in shades of silver and white. Inside Street, Helena Hospital, the days began to blend together, an endless rhythm of beeping monitors, hushed footsteps, and quiet prayers whispered to ceilings that never answered. Yet for Elena, every day carried a purpose. Every morning she entered the same room, greeted the same silence, and spoke as though someone behind that silence was listening. It had been almost 2 months since the wedding. Adrian's father had stopped visiting, his sister sent flowers once, and the world moved on. But Elena stayed. She began learning the nurses' routines, helping with basic care, folding the linens, and checking the IV lines. The staff often joked that she was one of them now, though she never wore a badge. One afternoon, Nurse Clara found her humming softly while wiping the windowsill. "You are turning this room into a home," Clara said kindly. "I do not think anyone has ever stayed so long." Elena smiled faintly. Maybe because no one believed he would ever come back. But I do. She turned toward the bed, her eyes gentle. Adrian looked the same still, pale, peaceful, but something about him felt less distant now. His breathing was stronger, his pulse steadier. Sometimes when she spoke, she thought she saw the faintest twitch beneath his eyelids, as if the sound of her voice was a thread pulling him closer to the world. That evening, she brought a small radio to the room. "They say music helps," she said, setting it near his bedside. She tuned to a soft jazz station, the melody floating through the sterile air. "You liked this song, remember? It played at your engagement party." She paused, then laughed quietly. "Well, maybe you do not remember. But I do. I was the girl hiding near the balcony, trying not to spill a tray of champagne." Her laugh faded. "You were kind to me that night. You probably never knew what that meant. So now, I guess I am returning the kindness." She sat back and opened her notebook, reading a new poem she had written. Her voice was soft, steady, the words simple but full of warmth. "If life forgets your name, I will whisper it until it remembers." For a moment, she thought she imagined it, but the heart monitor beeped faster again, a steady rhythm that echoed her heartbeat. "Adrian?" she whispered. "Is that you?" She leaned forward, tears welling in her eyes. His fingers moved slightly, almost curling toward her touch. Her heart leapt, but she forced herself to stay calm. "If you can hear me," she said shakily, "you are not alone. I am here. I have always been here." The door opened, and Dr. Harris entered, clipboard in hand. "Mrs. Hale," he greeted. "You have been spending quite some time here." Elena wiped her eyes quickly. "He moved." "I think he moved." The doctor studied the monitors, his face unreadable. "There has been some neural activity, yes. It might be a positive sign, but please do not get your hopes too high." She nodded, though inside her hope was already rising like dawn through fog. "Thank you, doctor." After he left, she whispered softly, "They do not believe Adrian, but I do." Over the next week, her care became a ritual of small miracles. She adjusted his pillow, read him newspaper headlines, even told him stories from the diner where she worked. "A couple argued over pancakes today," she said with a smile. "You would have laughed. You seemed like the kind of man who liked simple things more than fancy ones." Sometimes, she forgot that he could not answer. She would pause mid-sentence, look at his face, and almost expect him to open his eyes and say her name. But he never did, at least, not yet. Late one night, as snow fell outside the window, Elena sat by the bed holding his hand. The room was dark except for the soft glow of the machines. She rested her head on his arm, whispering a prayer she had repeated countless times. "If love still counts for anything, let it reach him. Please, let it reach him." Her eyelids grew heavy, and before she knew it, she had fallen asleep there, her cheek resting against his hand. Hours later, when the first light of morning touched the window, something subtle changed. His fingers twitched again, then slowly, weakly, they closed around hers. Elena stirred, still half dreaming, then froze. She looked down at their joined hands, her breath caught in her throat. "Adrian?" she whispered. The monitor beeped faster, louder, steadier. The world around her blurred as she stared at the man who had not moved in months. His eyelids fluttered, once, twice, then slowly opened. His voice was hoarse, barely a whisper, but the word that left his lips made her heart stop. Elena. She gasped, tears spilling down her cheeks. For the first time, his eyes met hers, tired, unfocused, but alive. In that single moment, all the nights of waiting, praying, and believing finally came together like the first breath after drowning. Elena pressed his hand against her face, sobbing softly. "You came back," she whispered. "You really came back." The miracle she had prayed for had just opened its eyes. The sound of the monitor filled the room, steady and strong. For a moment, Elena could not move. She only stared, breathless, at the man whose eyes were now open. Adrian Hale, the husband she had married in silence, the man she had spoken to for months, was finally awake. "Do not try to speak," she whispered, tears still streaming down her cheeks. "You are safe. You are at Street Helena Hospital." His lips parted slightly. His voice was weak, rough from disuse. But the single word he managed to form was clear. Elena. Her name from his mouth felt like a prayer answered. She pressed his hand gently. "Yes," she said, her voice trembling. "I am here." "Doctor." Harris burst into the room moments later, followed by 2 nurses. The doctor's eyes widened in disbelief. "He is conscious," he said quickly. "Adrian, can you hear me? Do you know where you are?" Adrian blinked slowly, trying to focus. "Hospital," he whispered. "How long?" "Nearly 2 months," Dr. Harris replied. "You have made it through the hardest part." He turned to Elena. "Mrs. Hale, you should step outside. He needs to rest." But Adrian's fingers tightened around hers. His grip was weak but deliberate. "Stay," he murmured. Dr. Harris hesitated, then nodded. "Just a few minutes." When the staff left, the room fell quiet again. Adrian looked at her, his eyes searching. "You stayed," he said softly. Elena swallowed hard. "Yes, I promised I would." He studied her face for a long moment, as if trying to remember something beyond his reach. "They told me I would not wake up." "I never believed that," she said. "Someone had to believe for you." "Oh." He closed his eyes briefly, exhaustion washing over him. "You sound like someone I once met," he murmured. She smiled through her tears. "Maybe you did." Over the next few days, the hospital buzzed with quiet amazement. The media was not told, but word spread among the staff, a miracle recovery. The kind doctors whispered about in hallways. Adrian's strength returned slowly. He could move his hands, speak short sentences, even sit up with help. Through it all, Elena never left his side. She read to him, spoon-fed him soup, and smiled whenever he tried to thank her. One afternoon, as sunlight poured into the room, Adrian said, "I heard you, you know." Elena froze. "Heard me?" "In the dark," he said, voice still soft. "You kept talking, every day. You told me about your father, the diner, the rain. I remember your tears." Her heart pounded. "You remember that?" He nodded faintly. "It was like being underwater. I could not move, but I could hear you, and when you cried that night, I followed the sound. It felt like light breaking through." Elena covered her mouth, overwhelmed. "I did not think you could hear. I think that is why I woke up," he whispered. "Because you never gave up." Silence filled the room, heavy with emotion. She wanted to tell him everything, the marriage contract, the promise, the truth, but she stopped herself. He was still fragile. For now, she let the moment breathe. She brushed his hair gently away from his face. "You should rest," she said softly. "You have a lot of life to catch up on." As his eyes closed again, she sat beside him, watching the rise and fall of his chest. For the first time since the day she signed the marriage papers, she smiled without sadness. The man she married for duty was alive, and though neither of them fully understood it yet, something real had already begun to grow between them. Outside the window, snow melted from the trees, dripping like silver threads down the glass. Inside, warmth returned to a place that had forgotten what it felt like. And in that quiet hospital room, hope finally took its first deep breath. Days passed, and each one brought new light into the once somber hospital room. Adrian's recovery amazed everyone. His voice grew steadier, his movements stronger, and his mind began to piece together fragments of his life before the accident. Yet, despite his progress, one memory remained blurred the night of the crash. He could remember leaving a business dinner, the sound of thunder, the blur of headlights, and then nothing. Everything after that was darkness, until he woke to Elena's tears. One morning, as sunlight streamed through the window, Adrian sat upright in bed for the first time. Elena was pouring water into a glass when she heard his quiet voice. "I want to know who you really are," he said. "Not just the woman who stayed. I want to know your story." She hesitated, unsure how to answer. "I am no one special," she said gently. "I work at a diner, I pay bills, and I visit a man who forgot how to open his eyes." He smiled faintly. "Then you are the reason I opened mine." Her cheeks flushed. She looked away, but he kept watching her, his eyes soft and curious. "You read to me, didn't you?" he asked. "And you talked about music, about kindness. I remember your voice. It felt like home." Elena tried to steady her voice. "You were never alone, Adrian. Even when you thought you were." Their eyes met for a brief, quiet moment that said more than words could. But before she could speak again, the door opened, and Mr. Hale entered the room. His expensive coat and polished shoes looked out of place in the fragile stillness. He froze when he saw his son awake. "Adrian?" he said, his voice cracking. "Thank God!" Adrian nodded faintly. "Hello, father." "Everyone." The older man turned to Elena, his tone cool. "You can go now, Mrs. Hale. I will take it from here." Elena lowered her eyes. "Yes, of course." She gathered her things, but as she moved past Adrian, his hand brushed hers. "Stay," he said softly, almost pleading. Mr. Hale frowned. "She has done enough. You need rest, not distractions." But Adrian's gaze did not waver. "She is not a distraction. She is the reason I am still here." The room fell silent. Mr. Hale's expression hardened, but he said nothing more. After he left, Adrian looked at Elena again. "He does not see what you did for me," he said quietly. "But I do." That night, the doctor approved his transfer from intensive care to a private recovery suite. Elena helped him pack the few things he had, a robe, some books, and the small radio she had brought weeks ago. When they entered the new room, Adrian looked around and smiled. "It feels different," he said. "Less like a place to die." "Ah." Elena returned the smile. "It is a place to begin again." As she helped him settle in, he took her hand, his fingers warm and steady now. "You said once that love is staying when you have every reason to leave," he murmured. "You stayed. So what happens next?" Elena hesitated, her heart caught between truth and fear. "Maybe next," she whispered, "we both learn how to live again." Oh. And in that quiet promise, beneath the hum of the city outside, something unspoken began to take root, something far stronger than obligation. It was hope, reborn in the space between two hearts that had finally found their way to the same rhythm. For a few precious weeks, life began to feel almost normal. Adrian was walking again, his voice growing stronger each day. He spent hours with Elena, in the hospital garden, the winter chill replaced by early spring sunlight. They laughed over small things, coffee that was too strong, the way she always forgot her coat, the music she played on the little radio he now kept by his bedside. But as Adrian healed, reality began to close in. He started asking questions that Elena had long dreaded. "Why does everyone call you Mrs. Hale?" he asked one morning, his tone light but curious. Was it a hospital error? Elena froze. The truth hung between them like smoke. "It is complicated," she said softly. He smiled, unaware of her fear. "Then explain it to me. I can handle complicated." Before she could answer, the door opened, and his father entered, holding a folder thick with documents. His voice carried authority as always. "Adrian, we need to discuss your estate transition. Your recovery changes certain legal matters." He glanced at Elena with disdain. "It is time she steps aside." Adrian's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Mr. Hale laid the folder on the table and opened it. "While you were unconscious, there was a temporary arrangement. A legal guardian was needed to preserve your holdings. This woman," he gestured toward Elena, "was contracted to play that role. A paper marriage, nothing more." Adrian turned slowly toward Elena, disbelief clouding his face. "Is that true?" Her throat tightened. It was not supposed to mean anything, she said, her voice trembling. They needed someone to sign, and I— So you married me out of pity? For money? His words were sharp, colder than the air between them. No, she cried. I did it because I had to save my father. I never wanted your money, Adrian. I stayed because I cared. But the hurt in his eyes deepened. You should have told me, he said quietly. You let me believe it was real. Tears filled her eyes. It became real. Somewhere along the way, it did. Mr. Hale crossed his arms. Enough. I warned you not to mix emotion with business. Adrian's jaw tightened. Please leave, Father. The older man hesitated, then left the room, the door closing sharply behind him. Silence followed, thick and painful. Adrian turned away, staring out the window. I thought you were the only honest thing I had left, he said. But I was wrong. Elena stepped forward. Please, listen. Go, he interrupted, his voice quiet but final. I need time. Her chest felt hollow. She nodded slowly, her voice breaking. I am sorry, Adrian. She gathered her things and walked toward the door. Before leaving, she looked back one last time. I never lied about what mattered, she whispered. Every word, every tear, every moment I meant it. The door clicked shut, leaving him alone with the echo of her voice. Outside, the first rain of spring began to fall against the glass. The same sound that had once carried her prayers. But this time, it sounded like goodbye. Days turned into weeks, and the space between them grew heavier with silence. Elena no longer came to the hospital. She returned to her small apartment, back to long shifts at the diner, trying to forget the sound of Adrian's voice when he said goodbye. Every morning she looked at the ring still on her finger and thought about taking it off, but she never could. It was not jewelry anymore. It was a reminder of the one promise she had broken by keeping the truth. Meanwhile, Adrian recovered at home under his father's supervision. The house was vast and quiet, filled with staff who spoke to him in rehearsed politeness. But nothing felt right. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face, heard her voice reading poetry or whispering prayers into the dark. He told himself he should be angry, yet all he felt was loss. One evening, he walked into the study to find his father speaking with the family lawyer. The words froze him in place. Transfer the foundation's ownership to the widow once the contract expires, the lawyer said. The widow? Adrian asked sharply. You mean Elena? His father sighed. That was part of the agreement. Her compensation for participating. I never expected you to wake up, Adrian. Adrian's voice hardened. You used her. She agreed, Mr. Hale replied. Do not romanticize what was business. Adrian left the room without another word. That night, he opened a locked drawer in his desk and pulled out something he had kept hidden since his discharge, a small handkerchief embroidered with the letter A. It was the same one Elena had left behind, still faintly scented with her perfume. He remembered how it had been damp with her tears the night he woke. The truth settled in his chest with quiet clarity. She had not stayed for the contract. She had stayed because she cared. The next morning, he drove to the diner where she worked. She was wiping down a counter when he walked in. Dressed simply in a gray coat, no trace of the wealthy heir he used to be. For a moment, she froze, her breath catching. You should not be here, she whispered. I had to be, he said. Because there is something I never told you. She looked up, her eyes wide. What could you possibly owe me now? Adrian stepped closer, his voice steady but full of emotion. A real beginning. She shook her head. It is too late, Adrian. You know the truth. He nodded slowly. I do. And I also know that no contract, no lie, could make a woman cry the way you did. You brought me back to life, Elena. Literally. So let me give you the one thing we never had a choice. Her tears fell again, but this time they carried something softer than pain. Then I choose honesty, she said quietly. He smiled faintly. Then let us start there. A year later, the Hale Foundation's annual gala filled the grand hall with golden light and quiet anticipation. Reporters whispered as Adrian stepped onto the stage, tall and confident, his suit simple but elegant. The crowd fell silent when he spoke. 1 year ago, he began, I was a man who had everything but life itself. And it was not medicine or money that saved me, it was kindness. He looked toward the front row, where Elena sat in a modest blue dress, her eyes glistening. There is someone here tonight who taught me that love is not found in contracts or fortune. It is found in the moments when someone stays, even when no one else does. Gasps rippled through the room as he lifted a framed handkerchief embroidered with the letter A. This was the first proof that love still existed in my world. Tonight, I dedicate this foundation to her name, and to every act of compassion that keeps a heart alive. Oh, quote. Applause thundered as he stepped down from the stage and walked straight to her. Elena rose, her heart racing. "You did not have to do that," she whispered. He smiled. "I wanted the world to know the truth. You were never my mistake. Elena, you were my miracle." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a simple gold band, no diamonds, no wealth, just a promise. This time, no contracts, no lies. "Will you marry me for real?" Tears filled her eyes as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "This time, I choose love." The crowd cheered, but all Adrian heard was her heartbeat against his chest. The storm that had once separated them had finally cleared. And in that light, they began the life they had both been waiting for, one, built not on duty, but on truth, forgiveness, and love that had already proven itself stronger than death.